Everyone. It is so awesome to see so many here. When Father Miller and I started to talk about this event and plan it, and Father Miller is saying, I want 40 people here. I'll admit, I was like, Father, I'm going to be happy if we get 20. Well, lo and behold, we have 40 people registered. So Father Miller definitely has a stronger connection with the Holy Spirit to move people. But I'm Carlo Stebbings. I'm the Director of Faith Formation for St. Mary's in Auburn, St. Mary and Martha, of which this is one of their parishes. The other is St. Francis, and Our Lady of the Snow. I'm in my fourth year now here in Auburn. So it's been exciting to see the changes and how things have been moving forward. And this is definitely an area of that we need to spend more time with, is with the young adult community. Growing up, there wasn't much for me. I grew up in Maryland and southern Pennsylvania. And while there's a youth ministry, there really wasn't much of a strong, authentic, intentional youth ministry. And then I went to a college where there really wasn't a campus ministry. But I always had a strong faith. I thank God that He gave me a desire for Him from a very young age. From a very young age, my mother still has. When I was in second grade, I did one of those sheets. When I grow up, I want to be, and I put a priest. And after college, I started working at the Kennedy Krieger Institute in Baltimore with autistic children. And never in my life did I ever imagine being in that situation, working with that population of students. But in 3 years, I grew to love what I was doing. I started as a one-to-one aide, and after 2 years, I was actually a classroom teacher. I started to go back to school to get my degree in education. But it was in that third year that I felt the Lord call me to discern the priesthood. I was at Mass one day. I looked up, I saw a seminary, and I was like, Lord, that should be me. And so I reached out to the vocation director. I went to talks, dinners, and eventually applied and was accepted for the Archdiocese of Baltimore. I was in seminary for 3 years. It was in my pastoral year that I decided I needed to take a break. And while discerning what is the next step, I started to discern possible religious life. I started to meet with the Capuchin Franciscans, and then eventually I thought, well, before I make any commitments back to a religious life or to study to be a priest, maybe I should make sure the Lord isn't calling me to get married. So I figured, hey, if I'm going to get married, I'm going to put my profile on Catholic Match because I want to marry a Catholic woman if I'm going to get married. Within a week, I met my wife on Catholic Match. So we are actually a online success story. Although she hates me because she was on Catholic Match for, 15 years. And then I'm on for 1 week, and I meet her. And interestingly enough, after we were engaged, I was over her house, and we were cleaning and doing stuff, and she was on the computer, and she said, Carlo, go look at the computer. I was like, okay. So I went over to the computer and I looked, and there was a picture of me as a seminarian, as the thurifer for an ordination coming down the aisle at the Basilica in Baltimore. I was like, where did you get that photo? She said, I took it. I was there. And I said, wow, he's a handsome seminarian. So she took a picture. And sometimes you hear stories like that God puts people into the same place, not knowing that eventually they would come back together and meet. And I must say that after dating and engagement and entering into marriage, we're actually be married 5 years next month, that it's definitely, it's where I'm called to be married, to be a husband and a father. But I treasure the time that I had in seminary because it really helped to form me into who I am today. As we enter into today, I can't help but think of where we are our current day, where we're in the year of St. Joseph. We're in the year of the year of the family. We're at the end of the Easter season on the vigil, the eve of Pentecost. In the month of May dedicated to Mary. And actually today is the feast of St. Rita of Cascia, one of the patron saints of hopeless cases. I look at those things because we Catholics should sort of mark our days and our months by what is happening around us, because the Lord is wanting to give us these graces, open ourselves up to Him more and more. So last month I was asked to do some talks in the eastern Wayne County parishes on the year of St. Joseph. And it hit me like, as I was praying the rosary, praying the joyful mysteries of the rosary, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to talk about. The joyful mysteries of the rosary and Joseph and Mary. Because the joyful mysteries of the rosary don't make any sense if we don't include Joseph in them. Because he's there. He's in every single one of those mysteries. And then I already had completed the consecration to St. Joseph. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have completed or have done the 33-day preparation for consecration to St. Joseph? Okay, some of you have. If you haven't done it, it is phenomenal. The Father Calloway's book blew my mind. But as I was thinking about these joyful mysteries and reflecting upon what Father Calloway has presented and really taking what saints and priests and religious have written for centuries, I began to really realize, like, we have done ourselves a disservice on one hand of separating Joseph and Mary. You know, think about churches. We have, now here, Joseph, there's a statue of him over here, and then we have the altar to Mary over here. Sometimes there's the altar to St. Joseph and the altar to Mary, for good reason. But I started to think, they go together. They're married. They're absolutely in love with each other. We don't spend enough time actually thinking about and meditating about the amazing love that Mary and Joseph shared. And they needed that love. They needed to be totally in love with each other because God, who is love, was not going to send his son into a family that was not full of love. Think about that. The Holy Trinity, love. And God sends his son to earth. He had to send his son into a family that was going to, as best as it could, model the Trinity. So while Mary, yes, from the moment of her conception, we believe that she was kept from original sin, given that amazing grace by God. So is it possible that, now, not at his conception, but while Joseph was in the womb, he received a special grace to become the husband of Mary and the father of Jesus? We get to the Annunciation. They were married. Again, you think about it, God was going to send his son into a marriage, into a family. We know the story. We read the story over and over again of the Annunciation, Gabriel coming to Mary. We know that story. But then we sometimes get a little caught up on Joseph's reaction. And we see in Scripture where it says that Joseph was going to divorce her quietly. I like what Father Calloway has to say. He knew Mary. He knew that Mary was not pregnant because she was unfaithful. He knew that Mary was pregnant because of God. Possibly, he said to God, Lord, I am not worthy that this woman and your child should come under my roof. I am not worthy to receive them. Wow. changes a little bit the story. That recognize the humility of Joseph, of what he's presented with. So I started thinking, wow, Lord, what did I do to deserve my wife? What did I do to deserve my children? I'm not worthy to be her husband. I'm not worthy to be their father. But like what St. Joseph received in the dream from the angel, take the mother into your home and raise the child as your own. So God says to us, you know what? None of us is worthy for the vocation we're called to. But I'm calling you to it. Because in that vocation, I'm going to make you holy. I'm going to raise you up to be who you are meant to be. So as we enter into this day and we hear the various talks and we're able to share, let's place this day under the loving hearts of Joseph and Mary. Because let me leave you with this final thought. Jesus said, you must become like little children to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Children need parents. Jesus gave us his mother, and he has given us his father to be our spiritual parents, to guide us. So no matter what we're going through in life, whether we're married, whether we're engaged, single, trying to figure out this thing called life, let's take the hands of Mary and Joseph and let's let them guide us. Because they are always going to lead us to their Son, and they're always going to lead us to deeper love, to deeper understanding of who we are. And so, Mary and Joseph, pray for us.
All right. Yes. So Carlo is a great friend. He is also a coworker in the Lord. And I hope that, I think I got this. Yeah. I hope that you will find many coworkers in God's vineyard. Some of you are going to marry the number one coworker that you're going to ask to be, you know what I mean? Like, we cooperate with God. Others you'll be friends with, or they'll have other associations with. We become who we are by means of these friendships. First, you might say relationship, that's not quite exactly friendship, is our parents, right? If our parents did not love us, we would die. Literally, children, infants will die if they're not held, if they're not cared for. They need that even more, perhaps, than food itself. Because they could have food and not care and die, but they could have care anyways. I'm not a doctor, but I think you see what I'm getting at. But anyways, who am I? So I'm Father Justin Miller. I was from a family, an imperfect family, just as your family was imperfect. So I tried to prove myself, to earn love by being successful, by being, these dreams that I had. That was going to be my path in life. And thankfully, God humbled me enough to not be successful on my own terms. Because if I had, I would have walked all the way to hell, just doing my will more and more each day. But God gave me the gift of the cross so that I would be extremely awkward at times, extremely out of it. Like, there were times in my life it was like so clear what would be good to do, what even I maybe wanted to do, and I was just aloof. Have you gone through times in your life like that? Like, you're just so in your own head, in your own plans, that you don't even know reality. I mean, this is my experience. And God broke through that reality little by little. I began to see that I was living, here's an image, right? Have you ever seen a Wes Anderson movie? It's very visually appealing. Every detail is perfect. The characters outwardly look beautiful. And yet something happens in every Wes Anderson movie. There's a longing for the innocence of childhood, where the people are good and virtuous, but they lose that. Something happens over the course of their lives. And they become jaded. They become empty. They become really evil. Let's just call it for what it is. Even if everything externally still looks beautiful, and there's all these little details in the movie that make it such beautiful cinematography. And at the end of a Wes Anderson movie, you're left really empty. At least I am. I like his movies, but they leave me very empty. And that's the human experience that the world offers us. We're created good, innocent, you might say. Obviously, there's original sin, but in America, many of us are baptized. I was baptized. And that innocence slowly loses itself as we follow the ways of the world, as we try to earn the love of each other and even maybe earn our own self-worth because we don't understand that we are loved by God. We don't understand how to receive God's love, so we have to concoct things on our own terms. So in these Wes Anderson movies, there's often suicide attempts, there's often great despair, sometimes there's extremely foolish behavior and sin too. Because the people are struggling for meaning and they're trying to get a sense of, I had something, life was good, and then I chose and I feel empty because of evil and sin, and now I don't know what to do. And that would have been my entire life if God hadn't given me the cross, the gift of the cross, to see that there was meaning to this suffering, to see that there was a person who was right there suffering with me, Jesus Christ, every step of the way. And one day, having tried every other door, so to speak, that was empty, I knocked on the door of a confessional. I hadn't been in a long time. And there was something within me that said, yes, it's time to go to God. I had prayed, I had always believed that God existed, but I don't think I ever really wanted a Messiah because I was content to be the Messiah, or so I thought I should be. And then when my whole, project of life was a complete disaster, I thought, well, I'm not the Messiah, so I better try something else. Someone else knocked on the door of the confessional. My life changed forever. A lot of crying, a lot of grace, a lot of beauty in that confession. And I remember leaving the church, and it was St. Louis and Pittsford, New York, if anyone has ever been there. There's a very, very large crucifix, approximately 1 story high on the back wall. And I remember gazing up at that crucifix and saying to myself, who is this Jesus? Because here, I'll be honest with you, here's what happened in confession. I saw an old balding priest before me with my eyes, but what I felt in my heart and what I knew in reality was that Jesus Christ himself was there, forgiving my sins, giving me back my meaning, giving me back the dignity that I had thrown away, but that God never gave up on. And so that encounter of God's mercy in the person of Jesus through the priest changed everything. It changed everything. And as I sat there, I thought, if that can be so real, that a man can be an instrument of God to forgive sins, everything I've thought about the church, everything I've thought about my life and my plans is wrong. And there was this real 180. And I didn't have to do anything anymore. I could receive, this is the struggle of life. We get an epiphany, but then we have to live it. So like the next 15 years of my life, we're living this epiphany that I can receive God's love. I can be his beloved. And then through the power of that love, be sent out into the world. Because that's the theme of our retreat. From love, for love. It was like I was reborn. That's the theological truth of reconciliation. It's as powerful as a new baptism. And so the innocence that, as I said in the movies and in our own lives, the innocence that I had freely thrown away, God gave back to me in the sacrament of reconciliation. He put in my path good friends, and there's maybe a little more to the story, but I don't know if now's the time to do it. So why don't we forward it? Yeah. So who is God? If God is, he does exist. His nature is love. God is love. The better thing, if you really wanted a good talk, is leave right now and take out your Bible and go to 1 John and read the whole letter of 1 John. And you would get a great sense that God is love. And that we are called then to love one another, and that this love is the most powerful thing in the world. So yeah, why don't you... but love is very confusing. I mean, right? I've said this in a homily, and I hope you can laugh. I hope we can have a certain joy. That love is the most misunderstood word in the English language. It's a 4-letter word. And it evokes a lot of other four-letter words that we really shouldn't say because we don't understand it. Why does it this? Why does this person, all these questions stir within our hearts. Love is complex. So let's look a little deeper at it. Eros does not appear in the New Testament to my knowledge, but Benedict XVI in 2005 has this great review. It's called Deus Caritas Est, or God is Love. He reviews in that encyclical that we as Christians have to embrace the desire of love. He calls it ascending love, as if to say that we can reach for God in the heavens by way of a holy desire that leads us out of our everyday existence and into, if we allow it, into the halls of heaven. That's really powerful. And yet it's sort of uncontrollable. There is a sense in which eros can lead to lust, and that's why perhaps for many centuries it was downplayed. Eros has to be tied with agape. Agape, a Greek word that literally means love or a self-sacrificial love. This Benedict XVI calls descending love, as if to say that as God did in sending Jesus down on this mission to earth, from heaven to earth, and there's a lot more to the story we could say about taking on a human nature and humbling himself and dying and all of that descent is the action of love. In eros, you're rising. It's like the balloon is filled with the Holy Spirit and it's just going all the way up to heaven. But in agape, you're getting close. You're getting close to another person. Sometimes that person may be very unpleasant. They may be smelly. They may be difficult in some way. But agape, calls us to get close with appropriate boundaries, yes, and all that, but get close in service or charity, yeah. Now, when we unite eros and agape, we don't become some type of schizophrenic person that is at times ecstatic and other times service-oriented. We actually become one. Just as we are bodies and souls, and there's a unity in our person, so you might say the spiritual heights and the great desires of our hearts that eros often speaks to, and the service, the kind of get your hands dirty aspects of agape, they come together. And that could be for our great glory. Without that, our love will always be impoverished. So there's a difference then. Desire we have. I'm quoting a lot now in the next couple slides from a book called Love and Responsibility. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of that book. It's by Pope John Paul II before he was the Pope. So some of us have, a lot of us have. In that book, it's very philosophical. And he could spend 30 pages talking about, let's say, this question. What is desire, and how does it become lust, and all of that? And I'll just say this, that our desires are in accord with God's design. Our inordinate desires are in accord with the result of original sin. But the desire itself is from God. He made people beautiful. He made our ability, our senses able to recognize beauty. And he made us able to do other things, like use our reason and our will. We'll talk about that later. So that when we sometimes, actually don't move it yet, when we sometimes get so overwhelmed that we maybe don't know what to do, we can have thoughts that might be lustful, right? And there's this whole sort of, you might say, mindset in the church that I thankfully received, which was that lust is a sin. Raise your hand if you know that. Do you know that lust is a sin? There are many people that actually do know that, but they won't admit that they know that because we don't teach that anymore as a church. It's a very sad reality. Raise your hand if you've ever heard, other than like Our Lady of Victory in Rochester or something on the internet, raise your hand if you've ever heard in a homily a priest say that lust is a sin. So some of us have heard that, but the minority have, so if you can't see what is being recorded, the vast majority of people in the audience who opted into this Catholic retreat and have lived 18 to 40 years of their life have never heard a living Catholic priest say in a homily that lust is a sin. And so that's a deficiency on the church, but a similar deficiency would then be to say that that's the most important thing, as if to say the whole world needs to know that lust is a sin because nobody knows that anymore, but that's the mission. Well, that's only a small part of the mission of Jesus Christ. And by no means am I trying to say fool around. By no means am I trying to say, just go with your desires. But if we live in a sense that lust is a sin, end of story, we will never know the story of God's great love for us. And then we can not only avoid lust and other sins, but we can use eros and agape, and we can go all the way to heaven and come back to earth through loving sacrifices. So I guess that's a long summary of John Paul II, that the desires are not in and of themselves bad. It's how do we respond to them. And we'll talk about that later. But the big difference between lust and love is that lust is all about us. We have a desire, we want to satisfy that desire, and so we take selfish and sinful means to do it, whether it's with oneself or with another. But love is a you-first reality. This is meant to be a visual, if you can see it, play on words, where love is about not only our desires. That may be the spark of something that develops into love. Even in charity, right? If there wasn't some compassion you had for the other in need, you wouldn't really get off your couch and help them. That desire to help them is, in one sense, something that's motivating you. But it's a you-first reality. That has to be the other, has to be our focus in love. Now, sometimes John Paul II says that love can live on the level of sentimentality. And our internet isn't working, so I'm going to visually describe to you a video that I was about to show. Have you ever seen Studio C? Does that sound familiar? Studio C is a Mormon comedy. It started on YouTube maybe 10 years ago now. Scott Sterling taking soccer balls in the face. It is a very popular video that they have. But the one that I was going to show is called Love at First Sight. And two characters are in an office setting. And they are, like, one is talking to their mother on the phone. And then the other is just working. And all of a sudden their eyes meet. And they're like, what is happening? They feel subjectively sentimental toward the other, who they don't know, they've never talked to before. And there's this gaze of, they call it love. And there's this encounter, right? And actually, sometimes this could be really, really beautiful. Some of you, if you're married, maybe Carlo, maybe the Cooners, Patrick, maybe you had an encounter with your spouse where from the very first start, you saw that there was something of God in them, or there was something special. By no means am I trying to discount that. But in this video, the couple never even talks to each other. They try to, but they're so overwhelmed by the feelings that they actually are extremely awkward, as is often the case in love. That you don't know how to handle these feelings, especially if you're Catholic, you're saying, I'm not going to lust after this person, so that adds another weight, and it's literally like you can't be human around the other person, even if there's something very good that you have toward that person. So in this video, it's funny, they actually throw up at one point. It's a comedy video. They're meant to be like in your face. But it's all on the level of sentimentality. Those feelings are so strong that they actually never talk to each other. And that is not good enough, right? We have to go beyond sentimentality if we're going to be actually loving. And so there is this, John Paul II would say, a need for a mature and cultivated love. Without that, you either will remain just in the realm of feeling for too long, or you will end up with this sort of idealized version of the other, and then when you see who they really are, you will hate them because they're not who you thought they were. A great old priest, Father Erdl, some of you may know him. He's in his 90s now. But he said to every couple that ever got married under his preparation, he said, yikes, very soon I'll conclude. He said to every couple that ever got married, you are marrying the idea you have of who you think that other person is. And in marriage, you will find out who they really are. And if you are married, can you raise your hand if you think that is true? Is it true? So we have two people. So everyone here is raising their hand, that they feel in a sense that they married the idea that they had of the spouse. But then in marriage, they find out who they really are. So we need a mature and cultivated love so that when we're shocked by the things about the other that we didn't realize, we still choose to love them. Okay, I have to conclude. This will be my last slide, Carlo, because we are past time. Do you know Christopher West? I have a very love-hate relationship with Christopher West. At times, I went to one of his talks in Livonia. I met Peter Van Lies out there for the first time. I was dating someone at the time, and his talk was so inspiring that I thought, well, that's it. This stirring of possible celibate vocation, this sense that God has something powerful for me, I can park all of that because Christopher West is telling me I can ride a rocket ship to heaven and I can be in love, and that could be good enough. The love of, if you don't know the image, he used to use these phrases. He's really, I say love-hate because he's really refined his approach. He is as all of us, in process. And so his sort of Rolling Stones-esque pitch to the world, like, why can't we find satisfaction? He's refined that in terms of much more articulate ways now. But anyways, he, in his refined communication on theology of the body, says that every human person is a beautiful mess. We are beautiful, we are good, we are created by God, but we are a mess. And unless we realize both of these truths, we are going to really have trouble. If we do not know that we are beautiful, and this has nothing to do with our external appearance, if you're a lady, I want you to hear that again. This has nothing to do with your external appearance. You are beautiful because God has created you in beauty, and this doesn't matter at all about the externals. And yet at the same time, we are a mess. Because of original sin, our desires are all astray. You know, we see someone, like in the video I was describing, we see someone who we don't even know, and we think that we have to leave everything, and everything is just going to be perfect because we have a plan now that they have sparked within us. And then we get all confused, and there's a lot of things. This is a human experience for all of us. So my encouragement to you would be, is ask God to let you admit that you are beautiful and that you are a mess. Because if you don't admit that now, you're going to wind up making a vocational decision, and you're going to either not think you're beautiful and try to prove it in the vocation, or you're going to deny that you are a mess, and you're going to try to find a person who will fix you or find someone that you can fix. And all of this is going to be, it's really like captivity. It's like we're enslaving ourselves to a plan that is not God's plan. So let us admit that God is love, that God has called us to be his beautiful beloved. But there's a messiness in love. There's a work that we have to do. And so we'll, in a second, have another talk from Patrick. We'll have a lot of good things in this retreat. But let us admit that God is love, and that we can receive the gifts of that love.